CFB Paint back for another week. Some big results to cover this last week, and um, some undefeateds keep on winning, and that's making things interesting in a couple different conferences. Um, Corey, we didn't even start or really discuss where we want to start, but maybe we start with the Friday slate. We talked about it was a big Friday for us as fans.
Mhm.
Maybe we start with the disappointing news first, and then go to the perhaps more exciting. Although, you know, yeah, we'll talk FSU Duke, and then we'll break down BYU Oklahoma State.
Yeah, FSU loses for the first time against Duke. I think it's the first time in 23 tries or something. Um,
Yes,
FSU's quarterbacks do everything they can to make sure that they have a chance to win that game, and FSU's receivers decided they didn't want to be a part of that.
that was my takeaway too. I feel like Luke Kromenhoek, the true freshman, he comes in. He's 3 of 7 for I think 40 something yards, but with two crucial drops. Without those, like if those are caught, I think he's 5 of 7, and I think he probably has 150 yards.
Yeah,
Like I think there are probably 50. One was like a 50-yard pass. It was dropped in the end zone.
yeah,
And the other one was I think 40 yards. Would have been caught at about the 10 with potential to get to the end zone, but you would have had to make someone miss.
yeah. Hakeem Williams kind of
Bummer.
coming in like he's coming on almost like a post route a little bit, just inside the corner, and then the safety's not there. But the safety starts to creep over, and Hakeem kind of looks at the safety and drops the ball. So they were great passes.
They
I
were.
think what we get here is we are going to learn what the quarterback fight is going to be like for the next few weeks. I think Florida State was more interested in having a fight for QB rather than actually winning this game. To be frank, because if you want to win this game, you game plan for one quarterback and you roll with that one quarterback. I don't know this. I haven't talked to anybody with this, but basically the sense I get is that, and from what I've read, Kromenhoek's camp was told that he played last week against Clemson. Didn't play last week against Clemson because Brock Glenn throws an interception on the third series, and Kromenhoek's supposed to play in the fourth series, and they're like, you know what, we don't want to leave Brock stranded on the fourth series. Like, hey, you threw an interception, we're pulling you. This is a short string, so they left him in. He started to play well. They scored a touchdown on that fourth series, and he starts to play well through the rest of the game. I think he posted the highest PFF grade for a Florida State quarterback this entire year. The
Yeah.
Kromenhoek family and group are not happy about this from the reports that I've read. And so I think this is kind of like, hey, no matter what happens, you're going to get in the game some. And so they got him in the game some. I think partially that's you talked about like why was he pulled. The only thing I would say is like he had some trouble navigating the pocket a little bit. A little like just I mean you're a true freshman. It's your first time being in the game. You're gonna deal with that. But at the same time, like he was throwing the ball well. But I think it was planned for him to only see a few series, and I think Florida State really did only care about trying quarterbacks rather than winning the game, or at the expense of winning the game potentially, which is an interesting thought process. We were that far down at the bottom of the pit that you're like, screw it, we're 1-6. Or 1-5? What's 1-6?
Yeah. Yikes. Kromenhoek starting at Penn State next year
I don't know. I don't think either. I don't think you have both of these at the end of or both of these on the team
in
by the end of
spring.
the year. If I'm being honest, I think Krumhawk takes the starting job by the end of the year, and Glenn has to transfer because there's nothing
Interesting.
that the only thing that I see better from Glenn than Krumhawk is the like ability to scramble and like the decision quickly to go scramble. But that can be learned quickly. And Krumhawk is not going to be as quick as Glenn, but he's going to have a better arm talent. I think you got to stick
He's
with.
gonna be more physical too. I think he's a big tough kid. Like
I think you've got to make that change to make the Krumhawk camp happy. And in reality, I think that's the case. It's like you got to. They'll both be playing from here on out until they make a decision. And Norvell better make a decision, or else if you don't make a decision, that's your
you
biggest.
lose them both. Yeah, you
Yeah.
lose them both. Yeah, it's a disaster. It's just a total disaster, and one I don't think anyone expected to see. If you were to go back like 12 months ago, like this time last year, just like, hey, yeah, FSU's undefeated, they're playing great. What if I was to tell you that spin this ahead and they're 1-6 next year?
Yeah, I don't think anybody would say they were 1-6. I though, if you be frank, if you were to say like what their preseason ranking, I don't think I would put them top 10. I didn't have them
No,
top. I didn't have them in my top 4 or top 3 in the ACC because I didn't feel like they had a chance to win it. I mean, Clemson, Miami, you've got other teams that have better or easier schedules. There was just too many unknowns, and the words out of camp weren't that great. The national media doesn't pay attention to that, but I think if we were said, I said probably 8-4 would have been the 8-4, 9-3, probably more likely 8-4. But now it's like 1-6 is, and we're looking at maybe 2-10.
Yeah. That's why I was like, oh well, you got who's it, Charleston Southern right before Florida.
Yeah,
Like
and
maybe you could win that one.
at this rate,
Maybe
who knows?
exactly.
I mean,
um,
you could honestly, and let's be real. You're playing against Miami this next week. You could steal one. The chances of that are not likely, but freaky things happen in rivalry games, and people play close much better than they should, or closer than they should. Sometimes we'll see. Maybe they've been game planning all year for this game.
well, that would be another set of problems. Like, well, if we're willing to sacrifice the entire season just to beat Miami,
Yeah, that's how it works.
what a nightmare. The whole thing's just it's disastrous as a fan. Um,
I mean, you were in the game despite having 3 turnovers on 3 straight plays. Like, this team did not play well. Your defense gave you a shot. It's just a matter of the offense figuring it out. And you're moving to freshmen, like you are. You're getting freshmen in there. You're getting your sophomores in there. And by the end of this year, most of that older upper class that isn't handling things very well was probably going to be shipped out. We're going to see some
yeah,
heavy turnover on this roster.
yeah, it'll be gross. Shifting over to a much more positive. So I saw the FSU game almost in its entirety. There's a few things I didn't because I was on my way to the BYU Oklahoma State game. Um, and I feel, I don't know, you get eyes on this game too? Because I
Oh
feel
yeah, I
like
watched the whole game.
okay, so maybe I'll give you my perspective and then you can chime in as well. So going into the game, there were whispers and uh, there were whispers that there was a QB change at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we all. I think it was like the unknown known to me.
yeah, I think everyone kind of knew it.
Yeah.
Um, I now have kind of a somewhat of a source over in that athletic department. Uh, a pretty light source, but he's yeah, he kind of said the same thing. So, and I didn't really know what to do. Like with Rankle, he played very sparingly in. Uh, I can't even remember what game it was. Was it the Arkansas game, the Utah game?
I don't
One of
know.
those games. He snuck in for a couple of possessions, and they really didn't do anything. I don't think they did anything like materially different with him. But so I was his running ability was a little bit of a surprise to me, and not that I would say he was a great runner, but that he was a willing runner. Um, and honestly, from inside the stadium, here was my perspective. Like BYU moved the ball just fine, right? You score a touchdown on your opening drive, and it's actually pretty quick. And it's like, okay, you get a stop and you score again. This is my whole philosophy. I think I maybe even said this on our preview pod, but maybe not. I can't remember who I said this to. I repeated it probably multiple times to different individuals. But like, if you give Oklahoma State a reason to quit, they probably will. Like, and BYU just never gave them that reason, right? You went up by 7, but you never once had a 2-score lead with ample opportunities to do it. Couldn't get off the field on third down on several occasions that would have forced a punt. They weren't really stopping your offense to any real measurable degree. You just couldn't that opportunity to score, get a stop, and then score again just never materialized for BYU. Also, I think there was a ton of and I'm curious to like how it felt on the broadcast, but like tons of nervous energy in the stands. Like it felt like after the first score, like yeah, that third down where Ollie Gordon breaks the tackle. I mean, he's already got the first down, but he breaks the safety's tackle, and there's no one behind him.
Mhm.
That 50 some odd 48-yard touchdown run, whatever it is, like immediately, like the crowd just got nervous. Was like, uh-oh. And honestly, like I am not. Well, I was gonna say back in my like college days and certainly my high school days, I was the rowdiest fan there is. Just really wanted to be that person that brought the energy and kind of was contagious amongst the group. But now that I've grown and matured and you know the internet lives forever now. I've been a little bit more like, all right, I don't do something that someone's going to catch on their smartphone that may haunt me for years to come. Uh,
You mean
I've
don't
been
do
much
like
more
this?
reserved. Yeah, exactly. So with that, I've been more reserved, but it was funny because like I usually am, like I'll cheer, I'll get loud, but I'm not usually like the instigator of
Mhm.
that. I felt like this time, I'm not saying it was my doing or anything, but I was just like, all right, for my section, we have to be louder than this. Like we have to be louder than this. And so like every time we're on defense, like starting up, like, hey, let's get rowdy, let's get let's get loud. And my voice, I mean, you probably can still hear it a little bit in my voice. Several days later, that might also be just a little bit of sickness coming on. We got it going through our house, but um, yeah, it was just one where there was tons of nervous energy. There were some big plays to be had back and forth. I think I'm a little, I don't know if it's just like, okay, Ollie Gordon's a really good player and he turned in a great effort, which he did. Like that part's true, but how much of that do I spin forward and have concern with the defense, particularly as you look ahead to UCF, where you have another really good running back in RJ Harvey and a better complement in terms of a running quarterback in Jakari Brown. But yeah, the final touchdown, I'll just maybe end with this. The final touchdown was we were in that end zone, and it was just a sight to behold him kind of weave. I was a little surprised. I was kind of like, I was like, oh man, you got to get down. And I've seen others try and call out the tackling effort from some of the defensive backs on that play. Fair, I think, because I was like, get down so you guys can spike the ball, and then you have two or three cracks at the end zone from inside the 10. Uh,
Yeah,
and he found his way, weave through touchdown. The undefeated dream is still alive for BYU. The Big 12 title hopes are still alive. They wouldn't have been out with a loss there, but I think if you're going to stay in that race, you had to have that win, knowing that you've got. You can say what you will about Utah's offense. That's still a pretty formidable defense and a pretty formidable offensive line
hmm
that you're going to have to face in a few weeks. UCF, I think, is just kind of a weird matchup thing. The athleticism, I think, will always be a challenge for BYU. So big win for the Cougars. I don't know if you had anything else to say on that game. That
yeah.
was my piece.
It was kind of interesting to see. Um, you could feel that the energy from the crowd was not nearly what it was like a few weeks ago, and they had another late game, and the crowd was kind of just going crazy, and everybody was talking about it. I can't remember which game that was necessarily off the top of
Well,
my
the
head.
K State game, but even Arizona last week, like it
Yeah,
was a mid afternoon game, and I felt like the like
I think
on
it's
the broadcast it felt much louder.
yeah. I think that honestly that's partially because like everybody knew Ollie Gordon is capable of going off, and it was just a matter of when, and he decided this game to kind of it clicked. I do think having a quarterback that could throw and he proved to be able to throw. He went I think 6 for 9 in the first little bit, opened up the game a little bit. All of a sudden you couldn't put 8 or 9 in the box anymore to stop Ollie Gordon. You kind of had to somewhat respect the pass. But the second Bowman came in, then BYU kind of tightened up clamps again and said, "All right, we'll put 9 in the box or 8 in the box and just cover man to man because you're not going to be able to beat us. And even if you can, good luck Bowman hitting the broadside of a barn. To be frank, um, like and that honestly that's the key I think to the game is BYU hurt themselves a lot. We saw a little bit of old Rhett's laugh with some picks. I think
Yes,
3 in this game.
two.
Is it only 2?
He threw two. Ropati threw. They did a
Yeah,
halfback
terrible,
pass.
terrible pass.
Terrible pass, but I think they also got away with a pretty bad pass interference on it. The same person that intercepted the ball.
Mm. Yeah, and then as far as the game winning play, from what we saw on television, it looked like nobody was around him. Like he was kind of like in his own pocket, but nobody was within 4 or 5 yards of him and couldn't quite get to him. And so looked like kind of easily slipped into the end zone. All I got to say is like BYU wins in spectacular fashion. We kind of see the same thing with the Iowa State game, which is and the exact same score. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah,
the meme.
yeah,
Tell me the
yep.
difference between these two pictures. They're the same picture. Because Iowa State scores with 30 seconds left to win 38-35. As far as looking ahead with BYU, you do have this UCF team that can run. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know whether to heads or tails of BYU's defense or not, whether that's a big concern. But at the same time, when you're focused on the run and you don't have to worry about the pass as much, that might help you. I mean, KJ Jefferson's what is he starting in this game? Or is
He's
he,
not. Jakari Brown started against Iowa State. He got Jakari Brown came in for KJ Jefferson. Who are they playing 2 weeks ago? I'm going to forget.
West Virginia.
That's right. So he came in relief of
No,
KJ
no, that was
Jefferson
correct.
in that game.
Don't listen to me.
And
Trying to
was
think.
it not that? Okay. Anyway, whoever they played 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, Cincinnati.
and oh, Cincinnati.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so he came in relief, and it looks like it's his job moving forward. Again, you get kind of a similar level of physicality, maybe not quite the exact same level of physicality, significantly faster and equally unreliable in the pass game. So
yeah.
I think it's an upgrade, but there's definitely still some flaws in Jakari Brown's game.
Yeah, if you're looking at him, he only has attempted 20 passes in the last game and in this game, so they're not going to rely on him to pass. But his completion percentage is like 50%. So we'll see. I do feel like that's where BYU's strength lies is in the pass defense. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this ends up. So
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be. I think that you are are able to have some teaching moments from your tape last week where you kind of ignored the quarterback on reads, and it'll be critical that you do not do that this coming week
yes,
because Jakari Brown can go for 80. Like that's no problem. Um, do we want to go like chronological order for Saturday, or
I
do we
don't
want
care
to go? Okay,
honestly.
all right. Miami Louisville. It's funny. Like um, our biggest fan, our mom texted us and said she listened to our podcast sort of after the fact, after the week, and said like it's fun to listen to it, knowing how things played out. And this is one that I actually, when she mentioned that, I kind of went back and listened to just the preview portion, like 20 minutes. And you do that on like 3x speed, pretty easy to move through it. But I felt like we kind of had this game nailed. Like I mentioned, like, look, I'm pretty sure this is going over the point total. So we thought it was going to be a shootout. We did think Miami would win somewhat comfortably, and they didn't quite do that. But I mean,
Well,
was there any point in this game where you felt like they were losing it or going to
the
lose
only
it?
thing I would say is I look down at the score and they're up by 14, and I look down again the score again, and they're tied, and I'm like, wait, what happened? So I flip to the game. I have every single
Yeah.
game recorded, so I can go back to
I
it.
love it. Yeah,
I
same.
flip back and watch the next scene. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you have a fumble and then a touchdown play, and then they were able to score again pretty quickly, and so that's the one time I was like, okay, you had this game in control. Are you going to keep it in control? And so I started watching from there, and then you just got cool, calm, collected. Cam Ward kind of just took over.
Yeah, goes back, scores another touchdown. Doesn't bat an eye. They give
Yeah,
up 14 straight. Because if you'll remember, I think they give up a kickoff touchdown to so
yeah,
they're
and
up
then they fumble.
14, and then Colin Lacey houses the kickoff, and then they fumble,
Yeah,
and then Louisville scores. So it's like, okay, you gave them like two touchdowns. That one was a non-offensive touchdown. The other one was significantly aided by your own turnover. And you're right. If there's a stop on that possession, that following Miami possession, maybe things start to get really squirrely. But Cam Ward, unflappable, goes
well,
down, scores.
and the other thing is like, okay, so they hit the kickoff return for a touchdown, and they have the fumble recovery, and they score again. But then it's like 6 plays, and you're in for a touchdown, and then Louisville marches right back down 13 plays, whatever, and then it's 5 plays, and you're in for a touchdown. It just felt like unless Miami's offense was going to hurt itself, they were not going to get stopped, and that's essentially what happened. I mean, Miami didn't punt the ball in the second half. They went touchdown, fumble, touchdown, 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 end of game. And
Yeah,
then in the first half, even they struggled a little bit. In the first half, you had touchdown, touchdown, punt, punt. But like it looked like they just started clicking, and it was just. I mean, you had a 14 play drive, a 6 play drive, a 5 play drive, 11 play drive. I mean, they were just putting together drives and being really, really efficient. I feel like.
yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah, they put on a clinic offensively. To me, it's just interesting. Their defense in the last few weeks has started to become more and more of a sieve, which again, I don't think there's anyone on your schedule, maybe sans Syracuse, that could really take advantage of that. Maybe Syracuse can, and that's like a question mark. But if we're looking at like a Miami SMU or a Miami Clemson
Yeah,
ACC championship game. Take the over in that game.
I know for reals. It's games. So. Yeah,
Anything else on that one?
honestly, it's just like I don't know what to make of this Miami team because I don't know who they've actually played. And you've had
Just Louisville.
and like honestly, I don't believe Louisville to be that great a team.
Yeah, I mean they had 2 losses going into that
Yeah.
game. They're a 4-3 team now. Like,
But then you've also been saved by some lucky plays in like California and against Cal and against West Virginia to some degree. It's like
yeah, I wonder if they're one of those teams that goes into like the playoff, like, and everyone has kind of high expectations for them, and then they just get their shorts pulled down in the first week,
I
and just
to be frank, I could see every single ACC team doing that. I mean, Clemson outside of Georgia has played nobody.
yeah, fair.
Then and the same with who are you thinking? Syracuse played
S
Pitt maybe
SMU maybe.
SMU, yeah. Like no, the ACC is way weak this year. It feels like.
I mean, I hear you on that, but I also just think like who isn't weak? Like I could make the argument for essentially any conference. Like,
Yes, there's much more parity. I feel like this year than there is. But.
yeah. So it's going to be fantastic. I think, for the committee and for the power brokers of the sport, it's like, oh, our 12-team playoff is a dream scenario this year because picking four sounds like a nightmare. So being able to pick 12,
Well,
I
even
think
picking 12 sounds
is
like a nightmare.
easier.
You're gonna have like 18 one-loss teams.
Well, that's true, but like, I
I
mean,
mean,
I just saying, like, could you imagine even picking four where it's like, all right, like,
yeah. I mean, think about it. We have
I don't
10
know.
undefeated teams right now. I think is the number, and not a single one plays each other until the very end of the year, like until conference championships or
Mm-hmm.
the Army Navy game. Like those are the only. Like they do play games that are going to be hard, right? Army or Navy plays Notre Dame. I think Army also plays Notre Dame.
Yes.
You're gonna have
Mm-hmm.
teams that play like uh, who's it? Uh, Indiana's going to play Ohio State. You're going to have very, very
Yeah.
hard games. But theoretically speaking, you don't have that many more crash courses where it's like, oh, they're going to hit each other and what happens. And so it's like you could end up with a very, very weird thing. I don't think you're going to end up with multiple teams that are a ton of teams that are undefeated. But I think you'll end up with a ton of teams that are like 11-1.
Yeah. How do you separate them out?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know when those first playoff rankings come out, but I'll be very interested to see them because I feel like already the AP rankings are already starting to really heavily favor the Power Two conferences,
Oh, yeah.
which should sound alarm bells for anyone that's not in those two because you can see like, hey, Boise is basically played Oregon to the exact same score that Ohio State did. Now they don't have any good wins, but does Ohio State like, um, like I just
Not
like so
yet.
that
Not till they
that's a
play Penn State.
question. I was looking at it, like we were looking at my wife and I were just like, okay, we're not the team we can afford to peek ahead a little bit, and we're like, okay, if BYU makes the playoff, could we find a way to go to that game, right? Like just kind of like just
Yeah.
sort of trying to figure out like is that even possible for us? And as I'm looking at their schedule and I'm looking at everything else, I'm like, look, I don't think there's any way that they can make it as an at large. Like
Who, BYU?
they have to win the Big 12 because
Yeah.
looking at it, unless you lose in the championship game in a close game to Iowa State, maybe and just barely maybe even
Yeah.
because I feel bad for them because they beat SMU before SMU was housing teams, right? Like
Mhm.
SMU wasn't anything. But my point behind that is like I don't know how many Big 12 or ACC teams you're going to get, and like I can make not a great argument, but at least an argument for Clemson, Miami, SMU, for BYU, for Iowa State, for Kansas State potentially if their only losses on the road at BYU and they keep winning. Like, you know, I mean, I just think that there's some ways that this could get really challenging, and you just see like, oh, the losses don't quite affect the SEC teams like they should. Like,
Well, and if the SEC starts loses a few more, I mean, right now we have no undefeated SEC teams. Like that's
but
going
how
to
many are in the top five?
yeah.
That's my
I think
fear.
there's two in the top five potentially.
Is that it?
Because I think you have Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, I'm trying to think off the top
Oh,
of my head.
Penn State. Penn State's the other. Yeah.
So
So still, but you have Georgia as a one-loss team ranked ahead of Penn State.
I agree. I don't think that's. I think there was an overreaction to this Georgia game because Georgia's defensive line played phenomenal. Let's move on to that game. Even
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do
Georgia's
it.
defensive line played phenomenal and won the game essentially for them.
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird. It wasn't your normal Quinn Ewers. Like back there, he looks like he struggled a little bit. I'd be interesting if you played Arch Manning the entire game to see how that would go. And like you get these two teams again, and if they were to face each other in the SEC championship, I don't know if you have that same thing that happens. Um, I think what you have to see is Texas do some quicker plays, and also make Georgia respect the run because they didn't respect the run. They basically played pass defense and just blitz the entire time, or not blitz, but pin their ears back the entire time. So
Yeah, I think Texas A&M or Texas A&M, Texas's offensive line had a pretty bad day at the office,
agreed.
um, and that was surprising to me. I thought that they'd be a little bit more. I think it was, yeah, like you said, decidedly that matchup was decidedly in favor of UGA's defensive line, and I didn't expect it to be so one-sided. I thought that would be more of a stalemate with each one winning their fair share of battles. That
Well,
was
and with Georgia's offensive struggles, the fact that they won that game, great. But you want to place them at number two over Ohio State plays defense somewhat and offense. Like if you look at Ohio State, I don't think they've given up more than 15 points outside of Oregon. I think that might be all year, or at least for the last month and a half. Um, and so it's like that team has a defense and an offense. Georgia has a defense. We haven't seen them score a ton of points on people. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't see that team as the number two team in the nation. And I think this is where we're getting to the issue that might favor the bigger two. Or you're saying is we have so much parity, we have so many good teams and not any great teams that they'll just let all the good teams from the SEC and the Big Ten in or Big 12 in.
exactly, and that to me is a problem. We'll see. Well, there's plenty of time for it to shake out, but again, the committee has not doesn't have. I have no confidence in them to make the right decisions at this point because of past experience. Can we talk about the whole trash throwing on the PI call? That
Yeah, go
was
ahead.
that was the most crazy thing I've ever seen. Like not the throwing it, like okay, fans are gonna misbehave, right? Like that part doesn't stun me at all. I'm stunned that it worked. Like, and I'm not saying that that's actually what happened, but like never have I ever seen refs like make a call like you. I mean, I think the little statement that the SEC released on it was just hot garbage. That was nonsense. Like every time, this is what happens when you have a flag. You gather, you discuss it, and then you announce the call. And after that, there's no like maybe it's if it's a reviewable call, there may be like a buzz down to the field, but that's not a reviewable call. The fans go berserk, and I don't necessarily. I mean, obviously, I don't condone what they did, but I don't blame them for being upset. I think ultimately the call I think was correct when they took it off, but procedurally, I am very concerned about like
This
how
is the
that played out.
this is the second or third time we've seen this year. Like the same thing happened in the was it Virginia Tech Miami game? It gets called the Hail Mary gets called a touchdown, or is that the one I'm thinking of? It
I
gets
mean,
called
yeah, but that is a reviewable play whether or not
right.
he
It's
caught it,
reviewable, but
right?
do you really see undisputable evidence that that catch is not made
Well,
versus is made?
yeah, and we talked about that at the time. I was like, okay, if you're going to release the statement saying like we see where he's touching it and he's out of bounds and therefore it's incomplete, like
Yeah,
cool, show us the screenshot, like
yeah, and
show us the screenshot and like Photoshop, put in a little like circle, like here's him touching the ball, here's where his foot's out of bounds, because I
my
don't think you
point
have
being
that, but
is
I,
we've seen that they've made calls. They were trying to get to the right call by any means necessary. It seems like a little bit, and
that I
the
would agree
protocol on
with.
that is really difficult to deal with because like you can't have VAR or VAR is a soccer term, but you can't have like reviews called on every single play. They are technically reviewing up there, but like you can't have every single thing be like, oh, by the way, that wasn't targeting. Oh, by the way, that wasn't like pass interference. Oh, by the way, yeah, you called the wrong player offsides. Like that's not a realistic way to function in a game. So I mean, we're gonna have missed calls. We have human error. We're gonna have human error. But the way this one was reversed, if we have the rules and procedures for a reason, then why do we have like we have rules and procedures that we don't go into this chaos? And like I think it was Cover Three that made the comments like it worked. I'd start handing water bottles out every single game, and
Yeah, yeah, it really does just kind of encourage bad behavior. That's why I was so like in the moment. I was like, I can't believe they just did that.
if
And we
Texas
looked
had
at
come
it
back,
like,
how would you have felt about that?
I mean, like again, I don't like it at all. Like again, I think the call's right? Yeah, but you made a bad call, and like me, it almost undermines the official. Like it ruins even more confidence in them that they're willing to kind of say like, okay, these people are throwing a fit, and maybe I took a peek at the video board and saw how big of an error I made, but I'm not allowed to do that, right? So maybe I should just be more cautious and not throw the flag immediately, or kind of try and think through what I just saw. It's almost like, and in basketball, to me, it's a little bit different, just because you have to stop play in order to get like free throws. I
Mhm.
feel like lots of times in basketball, they'll anticipate the foul as contact's about to happen, so they blow the whistle immediately. And I would actually be okay with later whistles in basketball, so you have a second to process what you just saw to determine whether or not there was a foul, rather than assuming there's going to be a foul based on how the two players are going up for the basket, or going up, like, if someone's taking it to the basket and someone's going up to defend. I feel like lots of times if they're moving at a fast rate, and kind of they seem bound for a collision, that basketball refs will kind of just guess that that's going to happen. And you see lots of those end up being like poor calls. I'd say like more often than not, they're probably right, but there's still a pretty significant minority of those calls that's like, okay, you just thought there was going to be a foul and you blew the whistle too soon. I would like to see kind of something like that, not something like that, but something on the other end of that, rather in football, where it's like, okay, throw my flag, but then let's discuss it, let's
Well,
talk about it.
and we do have that. Like that will happen. We see that all the time.
Oh,
If
I know. I'm just saying, like,
oh, never mind. But
yeah, pick it
the
up.
fact
But
that
this one,
this
yeah, they'd
team,
already announced it. They'd already moved the ball, and then yeah, the fans throw a fit and
but if
get rewarded for doing it.
I'll be honest, if I'm watching this game and that doesn't, they don't give that call to Texas, and Texas loses by 7 points, I'm like, y'all got screwed out of the game. Like,
I mean, yes, like I'm not disagreeing with you. My only point is like, when did that happen? It was in the first half, right?
second, I think,
It is in the second half.
yeah, because it leads to their second touchdown.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, like I hear you on that, but like bad calls happen all the time, right? So
Yes,
like I don't disagree that you got screwed in that call. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the game, because there's still ample time for them to, to regardless of if that went the other way, if you get a stop and you score on subsequent possessions, you had the ball enough times that you could have potentially still won the game. So
yeah, but I
I
mean,
don't say it's
you're
like it's
inevitably,
open and shut that that's the only reason you lose the game, but it certainly would contribute.
yeah, you're inevitably saying potentially a 14 point swing,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
or in this case, a 15. I think they went for two on one of those. I
I
can't.
think you're right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a problem. I think all the way around, it was just, I just thought it was nonsense that the refs, number one, missed the call, and then two, went outside of the rules to change the call.
Yeah, looking forward at both of these teams, like and their potential future schedules. I mean, Texas, who do you play? You play at Vandy. You play maybe A&M later on. I'm skipping over Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky. No offense to them. We all know Kentucky could win or lose any game, so let's not be crazy there. Um,
Yeah.
but like looking at Texas' schedule, they might have one more challenge, and they might go. They might be one loss team. That Texas A&M game could potentially be a very very fun one. And looking at Georgia, you have Ole Miss, you have Tennessee, and then a fairly easy schedule. Again, skipping Florida on their schedule and UMass, but like we have a lot of SEC schedule left. I don't feel like we really know who these teams are.
Yeah. And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think we're going to have to dust off the tiebreaker rules for each of these conference championships. That's a mess.
Well, that's the problem
And
when you go divisionless, honestly. And I kind of don't like the idea of divisionless. Like I
Yeah,
like
I'm hating it
yeah,
now too. I mean, I kind of like the idea when you had smaller conferences and it was much more likely that you had a lot of overlap between your top contenders. Maybe not every single one of them plays each other in season, but the majority, right? Like a divisionless Big 12 where there was 10 teams, like perfect.
yeah.
And that, obviously that one I think they played 9 conference games, so I mean even better. But like, um, but yeah, I think that these divisionless conferences with so many so many teams is it's gonna be a nightmare. I think it only gets worse.
Ideally,
Um,
if in my heart of hearts, what I would want to do is I want to push for like uh essentially like perhaps you push for a premier kind of soccer kind of thing where you play every person in your league, and then you have like you take the top two or three of your league based off of the rankings because you played every single person, and those people go play in the playoffs. And we're not going to get this because you have two power conferences that hold the weight, but I mean that makes it so much more fun. Like oh great, you're great in Italian league, but you are crap at the national level or at the world level because you can't beat the best of Europeans or best of England, sorry, or the best of Spain. Um, Granted, there is this dynamic where the games are separated by a season, like you qualify for Champions League the next year. But I mean, let's see, like, if you have these, I don't know, 16 team league teams, okay, play 16 games and then play a small little 20 game schedule. Like I don't know, why not? That's going to
I
bring in
don't
ten.
know. I think I mean we could go back and relitigate everything. My thought process was you didn't need to expand the playoff as far as you did if you have conference races again with smaller conferences with like even what like 12 teams or 14 teams in a conference in 2 divisions, like great, the winners of those divisions then go to the conference championship and then
Yeah.
your conference champions sort it out. Like that to me is like where I think everyone wins there except like, oh well, we're really good but there's a better team in our division. Well, it's like, okay, well then it's an open and shut case. You can't win your division, you don't deserve to go any further, which to me is just makes sense. It always has. um,
Or you have
and
to say like, all right, the top two teams in the SEC automatically qualify. The third and fourth team play for play in.
Maybe I don't know. Again, it's yeah, it's just going to be a tangled mess. So we'll see what happens. Did you get eyes on Alabama, Tennessee?
I had it up. The game didn't entertain me as much as I focused on it.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. I was like, man, the thing was pretty sloppy. Like, and yeah, I don't know. I thought Alabama can score and Tennessee can't. Those I think were my exact words last week. So I thought they were going to win that game. Um, you got everything you wanted if you're Alabama from Tennessee. Like they turned the ball over multiple times. You couldn't get the job done. I think Ryan Williams was a little surprised by the physicality of Tennessee's secondary. So that's something that he needs to kind of update in his game. But I just, yeah, it's fascinating because I think Alabama has a couple of losable games still on their schedule, and I think people are concerned in Tuscaloosa. And I don't know
What
if
time
it's
was
all
that
warranted, but
again?
hmm?
What time was that Bama game again?
I'm sorry.
What time was the Bama game again?
It was at 3:30 Eastern.
I'm trying to figure out what other game I was watching. I watched the Michigan Illinois game.
Michigan. Who else was in that?
Was
Notre
that
Dame, Georgia Tech was I think in that same block. And what was the other game? The other big game. I'm blanking on it.
I can't have it off. I don't have it off the top of my head. But I had it up, but it didn't draw my attention the entire time. Like hardly.
Yeah, I mean it was kind of yeah. Again, like oh, the winner, hey, congrats to them. But looking at those, I was like, okay, these aren't two elite teams. And granted, if you ask me, hey, point to an elite team, I don't know if I can because, like you said, I think there's plenty of good teams and not many or any great teams. But nothing about that game said like, oh, this is these are real championship contenders. At least not at this point in the season do I believe that. So
Yeah. The crazy
um,
thing about this game is that Tennessee kind of leaned on the run in the towards the end of the game, um, and was able to run the ball pretty well. I mean, you had 220 yards, and
yeah,
I thought Bama's pass defense was the problem. So is it the whole defense the problem? I don't know. I mean, you put up what 400 something yards on Bama's defense, no problem. Like, and you didn't look good either. Your quarterback barely completed 50% of his passes. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but again, I just look at some of these SEC schedules and like I'm surprised at how like for lack of a better term like how weak they are. It's like okay, yeah, we play one or two real contenders, but I mean again, I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here because like I look at every other schedule and it's kind of that same thing where it's like I just don't feel like there's a lot of heavy hitters in the sport right now, which is weird. But Tennessee going forward, they got Georgia. Outside of that, they play Kentucky, Mississippi State, UTEP at Vanderbilt at the end of the year. So maybe that one gets interesting in a rivalry game. But I like this is gonna be like I'm gonna keep coming back to it. So I'll only say it one more time. It's gonna be a tangled mess because you're gonna have lots of you know conference records with a one or a two in the loss column, and how do you sort them out? So I need to polish up on the tiebreaker scenarios for each of them. So because I think it's going to get, I think you're going to start going to that second, third, and fourth tiebreaker quite a bit this year. We'll see. I had a couple other things. Like we got to shout out Indiana, right? Again, a bunch of stone cold killers. We said it last week.
You said it last week.
I said it last week, and I stand by it. And I thank you for validating my opinion of you, Indiana, for going out and just blasting Nebraska and winning by 49 points. That was the most that any FBS team. That was the largest margin of victory in FBS football this last week.
Well, and I also follow a stat that says most deserving win. That was the most deserving win too. Like you single handedly beat this team, like based off your success rate compared to their success rate.
Yeah,
So
big time. So Curtis Rourke injured. Hopefully, a swift recovery for him. I know that they've got Washington this week, and then I believe a bye week. So hopefully, that's enough time for him to get right. I don't know. The backup QB looked just fine in that offense, though. I don't know if that was just Nebraska had already given up because they were down 28-7. But yeah, Kurt Signetti, he wins games, and I'm excited to see him keep going. Takes on Washington this week, which Washington I think is a different challenge, especially if you're going to have to play your backup QB. But it will be that game will take place at 9 a.m. local time for Washington because Indiana is or 9 a.m. Pacific.
yeah,
But it will be obviously a noon kick in the Eastern time zone, which Bloomington, Indiana is. I just that travel I think is just fun to keep tabs on. But we just wanted to shout out Indiana. I didn't have like a ton of analysis on the game. Again, it didn't really hold my attention because they were just murdering Nebraska.
yeah. I'll take it. I'll take the win. You called them killers. I picked them to beat the 6.5.
Yeah, you said like 6.5 isn't. I think your words were it's not near enough for me to not pick them.
I said if 7 maybe. So I don't
Oh,
know.
did you? Okay.
Yeah, 7 I would consider it, but like I think they'll definitely win by a touchdown. So
Oh, yeah. So good on them. I think yeah, we're getting really close to saying like, hey, Indiana's like a legitimate threat to get in the playoff, especially
yeah,
looking at the rest of their schedule. Like Michigan all of a sudden looks pretty human. Again, shout out to Illinois. You were all over that one too.
yeah.
But
And they play Ohio State too. That'll be an interesting one.
measuring stick game, but not a must win. Like
Apparently not. Yeah. Do you want to jump to that Michigan Illinois game?
yeah, let's talk about it. That was in the 3:30 slate too. So I
Yeah,
bet you that was one that had
that
your
was the
attention.
one I was paying attention to a ton. And honestly, what's the final score? Like 21-7 in that game.
Yeah.
I just remember watching a lot of the first half and going, Illinois, you are blowing every opportunity you have to put this team away early. Michigan could not keep hold of the ball. They kept giving it over to Illinois. Fumbles, interceptions, over and over and over. It was like I think there was 1 or 2 that were even negated by penalties, and all they were getting was field goals off of these pieces. And I was like, they're not going to lose this game if they aren't careful. But the thing is Michigan's offense never showed up, and that's Illinois is just a better team, flat out, and the wrong team was favored in this game. So,
Yeah, you nailed that one. Just a quick comment. I know that Mark, when he was a regular on the pod, used to call it the best uniforms that he liked.
They were
Dude,
the best uniforms this year.
the Illinois ones.
Yes.
So like I remember seeing pictures of them before, and I was thinking, all right, like I see what they're trying to do here. But like on the field, it was like, oh wow, this makes me want to go back and watch the movie Leatherheads, like that, that George Clooney, John Krasinski,
Mhm.
like old time football movie, because it just like looked exact. Like, yeah, like I think it popped really well on the screen. I was pretty surprised. I was like, they look like old school uniforms, and even like the helmet is like, man, it looks like they're wearing like the old leather helmets.
Yeah,
I was pretty impressed.
they had a guy paint each one of them individually. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
It
Yeah.
kind of
So
reminds me
just
of how my Landon or Jack had his helmet painted when he had to wear it.
oh yeah.
So we paid a motorcycle helmet painter to paint it, and that's kind of the same thing. They got somebody that specializes in painting those things and paint each individual one.
Nice. No, yeah, it's I thought that they ended up achieving the right effect. I mean, like the old school ones, like to each their own in terms of like what they look like. But I thought like the look really actually popped on screen. It was like it legitimately looks like they're like a team from the 40s is trotting out onto the field.